everybody, Jon Ray with Musing Wizard, and today I want to talk about feeling energy. That sounds like a pretty woo-woo thing, right? But if that's the mindset that you're in, if you're starting to explore more esoteric ideas, you've likely heard people talk about, oh, I can feel the energy. It lights up one of my energy centers. Oh, I can feel it in my hands. Oh, I'm having a hands-on healing experience. Well, one of the things that is undeniable is that once that switch gets turned on in you and you can actually feel conscious energy, there's no denying it. And so today we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can turn on your energy centers in such a way where you will begin to have a physical sensation of some of the conscious energy around you when you choose to tune into it. And we'll talk about why it's a choice and why this is a switch that you can turn on and off. But I've got Karl Brockman here with me. He's going to be asking questions, keeping me grounded, making sure that we root this into some practicality that you can actually take away from the video. But Karl, how you doing? What's your concept of feeling energy? Is this something that you've delved into, or is this going to be something new for you?
Good morning, g'day. Thanks for having me, John. Well, we've obviously spoken about it a little bit during our relationship, so I'm warming up to some of the conceptions I had about woo-woo reading, even chakras, etc. But I am juvenile, and hopefully it makes for some interesting questions and conversation. One thing recently, a good friend of mine helped me understand, which I think could be a really good place for us to ground and to start, is that we are under the illusion that energy exists in matter. And so we see people, we see things, we see the physical world, and depending on the, I guess, the state of the things that we see, we assume that they all have energy and that energy exists in matter. And what he helped me, well, I wouldn't say understand, I'm not sure if I quite have a grasp or an understanding of it yet, but what he posed to me was that matter exists in energy. And as I've been thinking a lot about this, it makes sense to me that, yeah, we are not only a receiver, but a transmuter of energy. And if matter exists in energy, then of course we have a relationship with the energetic realm, and it flows through us. And then that makes me, I guess, consider the chakras, people talking about blockages. You know, we've spoken in the past how trauma creates blockages and stops us from feeling feelings, as you opened up this conversation with. And that, again, in with that relationship, makes sense that, okay, as I am in alignment or disalignment, of course that is going to influence the ability for energy to flow through me. And that then extends to the things that I feel most energetic, or the situations in which I find flow. I feel like I have infinite energy. I feel like that doing those things give me more energy and helps me understand that perhaps energy does truly live in matter. So I thought that, for me anyway, that could be a really good place to start as a sort of high level understanding of our relationship with the energy, or what energy is.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat of an intellectual framework. I'll speak to it, and then I think one of the most interesting things about learning to feel energy is that it then becomes undeniable to your intellectual brain. Like, you know, if you're having a sensation, so it's not theoretical. So theoretically, I think what your friend is talking about is that we live in this kind of information field, or this electromagnetic field that makes up what we call reality. And depending on what cosmology you go with, we're either in a simulation or we're in some kind of a quantum construct that essentially makes matter the manifestation of the electromagnetic energy around it. And oftentimes when we look at science and we hear people talking about the physical sciences, it can sometimes be positioned to us as the other way around, that a physical object has electromagnetic field. But if, as we dive into multiverse theory and simulated multiverse theory and information theory, this idea that really reality at its base level is just a bunch of yes, no's, zeros and ones, binary information. It's a field that exists more as a probability wave than anything solid. What we recognize is that everything is the manifestation of that energetic field rather than the other way around. And so we can take that out of theoretics and ground that a little bit for us by actually learning to feel the energy that houses some of the matter around us. So specifically, I'm today for this video, I wore this little alchemy bag. This is a bag that you put different crystals in, you can put different herbs in, and it's basically a way to change the coherence of the field. We all have this power plant in the center of our chest. That's how we can move around. That we get our operating power from the engine in the center of our chest, and that engine, that power plant, is putting out an electromagnetic field. And the Heart Math Institute at Stanford has done a bunch of research on this and how you can bring that field into coherence using breath work and other things. And so many metaphysicians believe that when you put something in that field, just like with any field, there will be a resonance. It's like if you put a tuning fork next to another tuning fork, they'll start to vibrate at the same frequency. And at a microscopic, quantum level, that's kind of how things work, or at least that's the understanding that I have. And so when you put crystals within a magnetic field, it changes the way that that field operates. It changes the signal that field has. That's why we put a quartz crystal, in early radios in order to tune them, because the crystal actually changes the electromagnetic frequency of things. And so at a much subtler level, at a level of subtle energy that often gets called pseudoscience, but pseudoscience is just things that we can't measure yet. This energy does exist, and we as a human body, and a consciousness driving the vehicle of that body, can become an instrument for tuning into this. So you may have heard of people like Reiki artists who are feeling into the energy, or people, it's why the hippies in the 60s were all hugging trees, like they could feel the energy coming off of the tree, and that was opening up their heart chakra in a way where they actually had like a sense of compassion for that. And it becomes very difficult to harm the things around us once you become attuned to the resonance of the energetics and the consciousness that all matter has around us. And so in my own journey, I had these energy centers, come on in the chakras, and I started to feel them in my hands. I started to get like a yes/no energy wave where if something was a yes for me, I would feel this energy in the top of my head. If something was a no for me, I'd feel this energy in the bottom. And I went through a bunch of different practices to kind of fine tune my ability to work with this energy. And so I thought today we could go through some of those practices. And the first practice that I ever remember doing, I believe it was Eckhart Tolle's book, that has you just feel your hand. So look at your hand, and you say, okay, I'm gonna feel my hand now. And you just notice that as you really tune into your hand, that there's an awareness that your hand is there. And then you come back to your body and you're like, okay, I'm here. And then you hold up your hand again and you go, okay, I'm gonna feel my hand. And I can remember sometimes for hours staring at my hand and feeling my hand. And what ended up happening over time is by sending my conscious attention and energy to my hand, I would create such a sensation in my hand that my hand would get hot and it would get very tingly. And it felt like a kind of telekinesis, because here I was making something happen with my mind. Now, of course, I'm connected to myself, but it was still a sensation I had never had before. I had never consciously been able to create a physical sensation in my body just by thinking about it. But over time, and it really didn't take that long, I began to be able to conjure energy in my hands, where I could just think about my hands, and they would be full of a sensation that felt like energy moving through them, like a kind of actual electricity, like sparking through my hands. So this obviously was very interesting to me, and it was something that made me want to go deeper. I was not a very metaphysical person at this time. Eckhart Tolle was about as metaphysical as I had gotten at the time. I mean, I had read other stuff, but I
He's a
really
good
hadn't
gateway drug.
yeah, I have really hadn't delved into it that deeply. And so once I had that sensation, I was like, what there's something happening here that I don't quite understand, that clearly is happening. Like I'm clearly experiencing a physical sensation and I'm doing it with my mind. So what else is possible? So then I found Paramahansa Yogananda's Kriya Yoga. So there's a great book called Autobiography of a Yogi. It gets referenced all the time in Silicon Valley. It was one of Steve Jobs' favorite books. He gave it to everybody at his funeral. Um, and on his deathbed, like I think a lot of his regrets were focused in, maybe not living as closely to the principles in that book as he would have liked. However, that book is a very mystical book. It has all kinds of crazy magic, and like at some point some guy's arm gets cut off and then he just puts it back on, and there's all kinds of really interesting stories that happen in that book. And so a curious mind can really go down a rabbit hole when you have that. And so after I read that book, I was like, I need to get on this wizard mode. So this will tell you how long ago this was. They had a mail-in program where you would send a check to the Paramahansa Yogananda Institute in California, and once a month they would mail you a Kriya Yoga exercise to help you activate your Kundalini energy. And so I went through this program where like it was every month or every 2 weeks or something. I would get something in the mail. I'd be super freaking stoked because I'd be like, oh, this is my wizard letter. It was like still it looked like, I'm sure they were printing them on a printer, but it still looked like it. I'm sure when they created it in the 60s, because everything was like, looked like it had been typed on a typewriter. It was like a really interesting experience just getting these letters. I'm sure it's online now, but if they still make you do it by mail, that would be interesting. Anyhow, one of the first exercises in the Kriya yoga program that Paramahansa Yogananda had was basically that thing that I had been doing with my hand, except now you did it with every single part of your body. So he would have you lay on the ground and you would just notice your feet. And you would notice your feet for like 10 minutes. And what ended up happening is over a very short period of time, because I'd already kind of activated in my hands, I realized, oh, I can do the same thing in my feet. I can move energy to my feet and I can feel that sensation. And even as I think about it right now, I can feel that energy in my feet. And then he'd be like, okay, feel your shins, feel your calves, notice your knees, notice your thighs, notice your pelvis, notice your stomach. And he would go through the entire body. This is in a letter format, so you're like reading it. And over time, I recognized, oh, I can feel each part of my body. I can direct energy to my body using my mind. And then at the end of that meditation, he would be like, feel your entire body and your entire energy field. And that was the first time that I felt like I was doing an Hadouken from Street Fighter, because I had so much energy in my body that I was consciously aware of as sensation. And all it took was this noticing practice of really just being curious about what was happening in my body and turning those centers on, and recognizing that there was a more subtle level of information that was available to me if I just wanted to tune into it. So that was kind of how I first started to feel this energy. Now, I couldn't feel it from other things outside of me yet, but I was aware that there was this energy that for my whole life, I was probably 23 or 24 at the time. For my whole life up to that point, I had no idea that I was capable of feeling this energy or harnessing this energy or whatever I was doing. And yet here I clearly was having a physical sensation. Something was happening. So what was going on? I wanted to figure this out. So I'll pause there and see if you have any comment, and we'll keep going down the rabbit hole of how I kind of turn these energy centers on.
Yeah, I'm very curious as to where this leads. And as you were instructing, like just looking at my hand and feeling my hand again, again mildly. I obviously only did it for a small amount of time. I'm curious to do it for longer, but I felt a vibration, a tingling, and which was definitely interesting enough to keep exploring the activity. I'll say that. I really wanted to quickly touch on the tuning forks analogy that you mentioned. You know, and as you put two tuning forks together, they'll vibrate in the same frequency. I think that's just a really good way to show or to articulate the influence our environment has on us, right? And so we tune to the same frequency of the people that we spend time with, the house that we've decided to live in, the things that we decide to do. All of these things have their own frequency, and we tune to it. And then there's that old that saying that we are the sum of the five people we spend the most time with. And I think that makes a lot of sense in relation to this energetically, which is beautiful. I also wanted to pull out. You mentioned that you could feel like a yes or a one in the crown, and a no or a zero at the bottom. And I was thinking about how I would relate to that. And I believe a gut feeling is perhaps how I would relate to that. No, I don't know. Like my gut has always put up just a flag in some ways. It's hard to obviously comprehend or to put language to sometimes, but it's like, hey, there's something more here. Don't dive in. Don't say yes. You know, and yeah, I feel as though that could be something that people relate to. I believe that a lot of us have had gut feelings, and my gut is not often wrong.
Yeah, I would say a gut feeling is a little bit more than what I was doing. I would consider that to be more of like a soul knowing, like an intuitive knowing, where
Okay.
the energy practice that I was doing was really just kind of more reading. I felt like the process I was going through was like reading into probabilities and just getting kind of like a readout the way that a calculator would, where a gut feeling is more like a soul knowing that this is where you need to go, rather than just taking a reading on something. So I'll get into the next phase of where I kind of went
Yeah,
from
please. Where did this
Paramahansa's
lead?
thing, and we can get into what that yes no looked like. So I'm down the rabbit hole now. I'm feeling energy. I brought this into my meditation practice because I was already meditating, but it was still an intellectual process. And having this energy in my body made me realize, oh, my consciousness extends to my body, is what I thought at the time. Now I understand it to extend to the entire reality. But at the time I was like, oh, my consciousness extends to my body. Um I should be more tuned in to my body, because so much of my meditation up to this point was just a thought would come up and I'd be like, okay, dismiss that thought. A thought would come up and I'd be like, okay, dismiss that thought. Where after I learned how to feel energy in my body and I could kind of conjure this electrical feeling, I I started to use that in my meditation. And so I would conjure this energy bubble around me and feel this kind of pleasant sensation of energy moving through me. Not really knowing what I was doing, but knowing that there was something was happening. You know, like I the way I've written about it in the past is like a kid finds is really curious about an electrical outlet and puts his toe in the electrical outlet and has this energy buzzing through him, and he's like, oh, that was electric, and he doesn't know how to harness it or what to do with it, but he just keeps putting his toe in there because he's like, something's happening. And in my early stages of working with subtle energy, that's kind of what it was like. I didn't have any idea of what you were supposed to do with that sensation. I was just really proud of myself to be able to tune into it at all. And so I was just doing it all the time. And it was an interesting experience. And as I was kind of, this is the early stages of the internet before YouTube. Now you could YouTube all of this stuff and figure out what it is right away. Like I was having to go to the library and try to find like the one book on chakras.
What's a library?
Exactly.
What's
And so I ended up finding, I used to go to all these metaphysical fairs around this time because that's kind of how you connected with metaphysical information in the early 2000s. And so I started going to these metaphysical fairs and these conferences, and I found this guy, Jonathan Goldman, I think. He was a tuning fork and like frequency healer. And he had this CD that you could buy that would help you feel each of your 7 chakras, and it would help you tune your chakras. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's what I'm feeling. I wonder if that's my chakras. So I got this CD, and I converted it to an MP3. I had one of the first MP3 players at the around this time. And I would walk through my neighborhood just listening to Jonathan Goldman's 7 chakra tuner. It's like a 15-minute track. And each tuning fork he had set to the exact tone that represents each of your 7 energy centers. And over time, what I realized is that, oh, it's not just like a toe in the socket, like all the energy in your body is the same flavor. Each energy center has a slightly more subtle tone and feeling to it, and locality to it. And so as I was working with Jonathan Goldman's 7 chakra tuner, which you can just look that up on YouTube right now and you can get it for free, I started to be able to feel the energy in these specific chakras: the crown chakra, the third eye, the throat, the heart, the solar plexus, the sacral, and then the root chakra. And I could recognize the energetic difference between those. So I'm an obsessive compulsive, so I used to just sleep. And on this CD, there was a 15-minute chakra tuner where you tuned them all at once. But then there was like a 15 or 30-minute track for each chakra. So I started with my root chakra, and I would put that on repeat while I was sleeping in my room, and just have that, like, put the speaker like right up next to my body and just sleep in the frequency of that root chakra going off, to the point where like I would wake up with that root chakra so charged that it felt like I had sat on a hot plate sometimes. Like I was like, woo! And so over a period of probably 6 months, I did that with every single chakra. I just played Jonathan Goldman's frequencies at night for each chakra, to the point where I was able to distinguish between each of the chakras so vividly that it became a muscle memory to me. Like it was something that I could use. And right around this time, my mom started to get really into crystals. My mom is a masseuse, and she started to use crystal healing as part of her massage practice. So all of a sudden, I was introduced to all these crystals and started reading all these crystal books. And people talked about how crystals were conscious, and that they could hold conscious energy, and that you could use them for healing these energy centers. So that sounds super freaking woo-woo if it's just a theoretical thing. But what I've noticed is that when I would go and hold my mom's crystals, they would just light up different energy centers. I'd hold one and I'd be like, whoa, it would hit me in my 3rd chakra. I'd hold another one and it hit me in my heart chakra. I've got some moldavite and sugilite in this, and when I first put this on, my whole crown chakra just felt like it had blown open. And so because these energy centers had turned on, and because I had an awareness of them now all of a sudden, I was starting to get physical feedback at this new subtle level that I was attuned to when I would hold different things, or when information was something that I should pay attention to. So around this time, I was Googling something thing that was happening or some sensation I was happening. And I landed on this really weird spiritual transformation blog that was run by this guy Etienne and out of Mexico. And when I landed on his blog, my crown chakra blasted open. This was one of the like biggest energetic experiences I had ever had. And I was like, what the fuck is going on with this website? This is so wild. And I recognized that because time and space are an illusion, and because everything exists non-locally in consciousness, when you're engaging with content on the internet that's seemingly from a guy in Mexico, it's as if your field is overlapping with that. And so I started to have these sensations where anytime I was in the presence of someone physically or remotely at a distance, I could start to feel certain things about their energy. And I wasn't quite an empath yet. Like I would consider myself an empath now, where I could actually feel people's emotions or like get a sense for what they're actually feeling. This was still more like what I call calculator energy. It was just like sending out a probe and then getting back a reading, and then being able to know what that reading was. So around this time, I started to work with this crazy wizard in Mexico, and he was batshit crazy. But because I was having like these weird physical sensations, I was like, there must be something here for me. Like, what is going on? He was really into alchemy and opening up these like 20, I think it was 27 or 28 rings of energy that you can open up in alchemy. And these are basically subtleties of the energy body that expand out into the cosmos. And so through this guy and through another crazy wizard named Jacques Martel, or what? No, Jacques Martel's a different wizard. Another guy named Jacques. I started to work through their meditations to open up these energy centers, and I started to recognize that I could feel into the energy of physical objects around me, or I could envision my energy field being the size of the Earth, or the size of the solar system, or the size of the universe, and actually have like a physical sensation of expansion as I was doing that. And so then I was like, how much of this is me inventing these things and and just triggering different physical sensations in my body versus like these actually happening? And that's kind of where I landed on simulation theory, is that what if it's both? What if it's that at a certain level you become so attuned that making it up is the reality? And so that kind of led me further down a rabbit hole by this guy Tom Campbell that we can get into. But I'll pause there, and any questions about that data dump that I just gave?
Yeah, a lot. But let's. I like how you linked it back to how you perhaps landed on simulation theory. You know, it makes me think of the placebo effect. And so someone has an illness and you give them a sugar pill and tell them that this will cure the illness. And for not everyone, but for a lot of people, it does cure the illness, or it does alleviate symptoms. And again, yeah, how much of it is you making this up and buying into a way of thought and feeling, and how much of it is, well, perhaps there is more. And then, well, what if it's both? Like you said, what if, again, you are truly just rendering your reality, your experiences, all the way down to the core? It also makes me think about, like, I believe I've handled crystals before. I don't know which ones they were and what they were supposed to do, and I did this. I'm thinking back to a fair that I went with mum when we were overseas, like years and years ago, and I don't remember having such a profound experience. Would that be perhaps the case, that I wasn't attuned or not open to that experience happening, do you think?
Yeah. So early on in the conversation, I said it was a light switch that you get to decide if you want to turn on and
Mm.
off. And because these are consciousness instruments, there has to be a conscious, or they work better when there is a conscious recognition of them, when you're choosing into those things. And it's one of the reasons that if somebody is a really strong skeptic, they're not going to ever have a sensation of those things, because it would be like telling someone who's the best healer in the world, you're a liar, I don't believe anything that you're going to do. And that person would be like, okay, well then it's probably not my place to heal you, because you don't, that's not what you want. And so a crystal, any consciousness technology is that same way. It basically says, okay, if that's what you want, I'll mirror back to you what you're saying that you want. And consciousness devices of all kinds are this way. And it's one of the things that I think, as we recognize consciousness and the field of noetics as an integral part of science, as we bring that in and stop calling it woo-woo and bring in to actual academic study, noetic sciences, I believe, will open us up to a whole new level of invention and innovation, because if you've ever read any of the books about aliens and how alien craft work, alien craft are actually biological computers. They have figured out how to grow a spacecraft that they then communicate with telepathically using their consciousness. So maybe that's science fiction, or maybe that's how these things actually work. But there's tons of literature from people who are supposedly channeling alien creatures, or entities that have advanced technology. And all of the technology is consciousness based. The interface is consciousness. And so it leads me to believe that at some point we will see a breakthrough where we recognize, oh, consciousness is something that can actually be measured. And once we can measure it, we can actually direct it in a way to fuel certain technological processes. And so anyhow, I think that it is one of those things where it's a choose your own adventure. Everything is. And so if you want to have an interesting healing experience, then yeah, you can swing the placebo effect in your favor. I mean, we know that it's getting harder and harder for pharmaceutical companies to pass pharmaceutical drugs, because they have to run a trial against a placebo, and the placebo is doing just as well as the actual drug in all of these trials. And so it's really hard to get the FDA to approve something when they're like, well, the sugar pill is working just as well. And one of the things that many metaphysicians believe is that our galaxy is actually kind of on this spinning plate, and this plate is moving into higher octaves of frequency. And as we move into higher octaves of frequency, it actually becomes much easier to use these consciousness wizard powers. And so that's why the rate of placebos being effective are going up. And so in order for pharmaceutical companies to try to get around this, they invented something called a nocebo. So a nocebo is when you give somebody a sugar pill and you tell them it's going to give them negative side effects. Well, what they recognize is that the nocebo was even more effective than the placebo, because people are much better at believing that something negative is going to happen to them. And so all of this, I think, is pointing to this eventual breakthrough that we're going to have, that the mechanism for technologically engaging with the simulation or whatever reality is your consciousness. And we will have to recognize it as its own construct, as something that is not derived from matter, but like your friend said, matter lives within the energy of consciousness.
Very, very interesting. I was thinking about, I was very lucky to spend some time with one of my best friends at a monastery in the Blue Mountains here in Australia, and speaking about attuning and being open to energy. As soon as I drove into that place, it was incredible. You felt the energy straight away, and part of the routine there before a meal is that the meal is blessed, and you take a minute to consciously have a relationship with the nourishment you're about to receive, and that brings a lot of presence, doesn't it? It brings you a lot of it brings you right to this moment. And I'm sure everyone, well, a lot of us are guilty of this, but I'm a guy who loves to eat, and I'll devour anything in front of me, and a lot of the time it's not a very conscious act, but but to be in this monastery, in this place, and to be a part of that blessing, and then to eat the nourishment in front of me, I just, that was a beautiful experience, and I very much felt the food's relationship with me as it filled my stomach. And it could have partly been also because you fast from 10:30 into the evening, and you don't eat until 6 a.m. the next morning, so that could have definitely been a part of it too. But I found that very interesting, and you mentioned earlier that you don't yet call yourself, sorry, at that time in the past you probably weren't an empath, but you are now. It's clear to me that some people intuit these things a lot easier than others. My mother, for example, is the I wouldn't say she's grounded and across reading her own energies and transmuting them into magic like a wizard would be, but man, she can feel other people's feelings. Like she is right there with you through the good, the bad, the ugly. And that is something that she 100% is open to, and I feel very blessed to have in my DNA a part of my physiology. I think it really helps me connect with people, understand what's going on around me, read the room, as they say a lot in business, and has helped me out in a lot of ways. And I can only imagine if that part of me was blocked off, or if I didn't have that opportunity to feel into the people and the environment around me, then yeah, how would I orient myself a lot more ignorantly, I'm sure. But yeah, tell me about the work of Tom Campbell and how this continues to evolve in terms of your story.
Yeah. So really from the time that I started to have this concept of these kind of energetic structures within alchemy, I was starting to really get into yoga because I had read a book called Youth Yoga and Reincarnation by Jess Stern, and it was this crazy book written, I think, in the early 70s. But it was about this guy that goes to this like yoga retreat center, and he's doing all this research on people that can remember past lives, and he's a journalist that's trying to figure out like what the heck is going on here, and so he goes and lives on this yoga ranch, and at this yoga ranch there's this guy who does this thing called cloud bursting, and so he sits in meditation outside at this ranch, and he looks up at this at a cloud, and he says, you pick a cloud and I'll make it disappear, and then he directs all of his conscious energy towards the cloud and dissolves these clouds. And then this apparently was a very popular thing in the 70s called cloud bursting, and it was basically this thing where you could kind of prove to yourself that consciousness was something that could be thrown, that could be expanded, and so I got obsessed with cloud bursting, and I used to go and sit out at the football field at the school by my house at the time, and I would just look up at the clouds, and I would make clouds disappear, or at least I thought I was, and I was always like, would that cloud have disappeared if I hadn't been looking at it? Like, is it just that clouds disappear, or did I make that cloud disappear? And so this became a really interesting like meditative game that anytime I was outside, I would practice cloud bursting. And one of the things that they were always doing to strengthen the ability of their consciousness to do this cloud bursting was all these different yogic practices. And so I said, if there really is a mystical force that I can engage with, I owe it to myself to explore this as deeply as I can. So there was a 6-month period where I became a vegan. I didn't eat any meat. I only ate this thing that I called yogi stew, which was basically like lentils and tomatoes. That's all I ate for like 6 months. And I was doing 90 minutes to 2 hours of yoga every single morning. I got super flexible, like all the pain that had developed in my body from being a long distance runner for so many years. Oh, around that time, I missed a part of the story. Like around the time that I discovered Jonathan Goldman, I had suffered a really bad injury because I was a long distance runner. I was running like 12 to 14 miles a day, for almost 10 years in a row. And one day I woke up after I had done a run like I always did every single day. I tried to get out of bed, and I had like a slipped disc in my back that was so painful that I couldn't stand up. And so one of the things that I got into around that time was this thing called muscle testing. So muscle testing, because I went to a traditional doctor, they did the x-rays, they told me I was going to have surgery. They said the surgery is probably not going to be successful and you'll probably never be able to run again. And this was unacceptable to me. So because I already had kind of the flavor of there's something spiritual or energetic happening, and I was starting to explore all of these things, I typed into Google something like energy healing Austin or something for a bad back, and I found this guy who did muscle testing, and basically he was reading into your body's what he and people like Cryon call your body consciousness. So at an or what Cryon calls your innate consciousness. It's basically your body's ability to know what it needs. And in muscle testing, what they recognized is if I hold a bottle of liquor and then the doctor says, "Does your body want this?" the electrical signals in my arm will get really weak and my arm will drop. It'll be more difficult for me to hold my arm straight. But if I put something like kale, you know, in my hand, my body will get really strong if that's a nutrient that it wants. Because it's basically showcasing if you were to imbibe this thing, what would it do to your electrical signals? And so they use this as a way to read into your body consciousness, to your energy fields, and determine what kind of supplementation your body needs to repair itself. Because remember, your body is a pharmacy. Your body is designed to heal itself. The problem is that if the pharmacy doesn't have all the ingredients it needs to heal itself, it can't do it. And so because we live off of processed foods and we eat garbage and we overclock our systems with sugar, and for me, it was alcohol and drugs at the time. It's so funny. One of the ironic things about metaphysical people is like, here I was like trying to be really spiritual and feel at these subtle levels, and I'm like going to be an energetic master, but then I'm like, but I'm still going to get blasted on alcohol and drugs every single weekend. And so it's just
Well, that's
like,
how you get closer to God, Jon. Everyone knows that.
it's just like such an oxymoron, but I digress. Anyhow, so I got on a supplementation program, and one of the things that he suggested was that I started doing yoga, and so that's kind of how I ended up reading the youth yoga and reincarnation, and found this you know, yoga practice that I could do every morning. And so I would go outside in the sun. Like I was getting really into like sun staring at the time, which is where you like stare at the sun as it's coming up in the morning and as it's setting, and you stare into infinity and you open up your ability to like see into reality. I was really deep down the rabbit hole of like wanting to open this stuff up. But what I recognized is that doing the yoga made me way more sensitive to energy. And one of the things that I was experimenting with at the time was a thing called a pendulum. So many mystics use a pendulum to get a yes/no answer. It's basically the same premise of muscle testing. So there's tiny micro motions or transactions in your body, and if something is a yes, your body will end up shaking the pendulum in a yes direction, but if something is a no, it'll shake it no in a no direction. And so then you can ask the pendulum questions and you get a similar result as what you would get when you're muscle testing with someone, if you learn how to read into that. So I became obsessed with this, and I was just asking yes/no questions about literally everything. And what ended up happening is, because I put so much attention to it, because again, I'm obsessive compulsive, I started to be able to get answers to those yes/no questions, basically to read what my body consciousness was saying without needing the pendulum. And so I would say, do you want to eat this thing or this thing on the menu? And when I pointed to one thing, the energy would move up, like fly up to the top of my head. When I pointed it to the other thing, it would sink down to the bottom. So there was like over a year of my life where literally every choice that I made, I just did like that, just to see what would happen. And I ended up in a lot of like interesting places. I used this to figure out like what book I should get at the bookstore. And so I just went down, I ended up going down all these insane rabbit holes that I would not have otherwise gone down. Because I would like go through the phone book and be like, which psychic should I work with? Boom. Okay, I'm gonna go work with this one. Anyhow, so I was having this weird experience, and through all of that, I recognized that there was some kind of a conscious relationship that I had with my body that existed at this subtle level. But what I started to realize was that just like my body wasn't me, my energy wasn't me either. Like my spirit body wasn't me either. There was actually another flavor of me that was a deeper flavor of me that wasn't just a yes no thing. And that's what you were talking about with that gut feeling, that knowing, that's the soul knowing. And so I started to have an experience as I got really into this guy AJ Miller, who has he calls himself Jesus, and he has this work called Divine Truth. I started to get really into this idea that you have the physical body, the spiritual body, and then the soul. And the soul is actually the consciousness unit that houses the electromagnetics of the spirit body and the physicality that's manifested as the physical body. But the soul was actually where the deepest level of truth lived, and you could tune into that. And all of these consciousness devices and tools were just ways to kind of open up the spirit body to get you to recognize the soul. And so in many ways, an alchemy bag like this and crystals and quantum devices and pyramids, I went through a whole phase where I was just wearing a pyramid hat all the time. Okay, don't make me go down the pyramid rabbit hole. But
I'm gonna have to, Jon.
all of these things are basically training wheels that open you up to connecting into the higher level beingness, which is the soul. And so I started to then experiment with getting rid of all of these things. I got rid of thousands of dollars of crystals. I got rid of you know, all my pyramids. I had like all of this like quantum jewelry, shungai, like all of these things that I'd used in my meditations and was like really into. I was like, okay, I went about as deep as I could go with those. What happens if I get rid of it all? And then I had a really interesting experience of one, having to feel through my feelings of how addicted I had become to those things because they had become crutches for me. And two, having a recognition that, oh, this is what Jesus was talking about. Like this is why you don't need idolatry. This is why you don't need to sacrifice an animal anymore. Because really, once you get into the soul body, which is the true conscious being, you don't need any of the physical devices, because all of those physical devices are an illusion. They're just a permission slip for you to believe that something is possible for you. But actually, you don't need any of that, because Christ, as we talked about in our video, Christ is your imagination. Christ is the most optimal imagination. And when you're wearing the mantle of Christ, when you're wearing the most optimal form of imagination, you just see the outcome that you thought the crystal was going to bring in, and you just believe it to be possible. You don't need to be wearing it around your neck in order to engage that. Now, we don't always have the mantle of Christ on, though, right? Because we're what the Bible would call sinners. Sometimes we miss the mark, and so sometimes I find myself in moments of doubt returning to some of these training wheel tools, not because it's wrong, not because these are evil, but it would just be like if I temporarily forgot how to ride a bike, but I still want to ride the bike. Okay, well, let me just get the bike that has training wheels, because I still remember how to do that one. And so I often will return. So then I started to acquire some of my crystals again with a deeper understanding that oh, this isn't where the power comes from. The power comes from me being able to believe and see something as real, know it as real. That's where the power comes from. Whatever device allows me to then have that knowing is fine. But if it's a physical device, it's training wheels. And so True wizardry is not needing that stuff. But of course, sometimes it's fun to use the stuff. And sometimes when you're introducing it to other stuff, like it's so hard sometimes for me to go to somebody who has no concept of anything that we've talked to in and say, well, why don't you just feel your feelings? We've been having that conversation for 6 months now, and and we're still saying the same damn thing. Sometimes it's more fun to be like, now actually, this Moldavite is a meteor that landed in Czechoslovakia, and it was mined. There's a very small amount of this, and this meteor has what we can only assume is space energy to it. It came from outer space. It landed on the Earth, and they call this stone the Holy Grail stone. They call this stone the spiritual accelerator stone, because when you hold the stone in your field, it brings everything that you've been avoiding. It brings all the compartmentalized walls. It dissolves them all. And that's going to look like a shit show for a hot second, but you're going to deal with all of that karmic mess very quickly, and then you're going to be on an accelerated path. That's a story that's easier for somebody to buy into than me saying, well, if you feel your feelings, you'll just get where you need to go. People like the story because they still need the training wheels. And sometimes it's fun to be a storyteller, which is why sometimes I still wear the alchemy bag. This is actually, I got this bag and the stones in here for a friend of mine who's coming into town, and I'm going to gift this. And one of the things I learned working with stones is that you can warm up a crystal. So just like running energy through anything, you want to clear out all the tubes of the crystal to make sure that energy, because it has its own energy centers as well. So you want to make sure that energy's flowing through that. So I've been wearing this alchemy bag for the last week. One, because I was like, oh boy, I remember Moldavite. And I actually did have a clearing experience that was related to that. But that's how you start to run energy through the stones. And then when you give them to someone, it's more likely that they'll end up having an energetic reaction to the stones and make a connection with it, because you've already opened up the energy. Or that's the story that I like to tell. And wizardry is so much about storytelling and just saying things in a way where somebody believes it enough to take it into their own consciousness and then invent their world around that.
Well, especially you, right? Like, you want to believe it enough, like,
Right.
not you directly, John, but the individual, and we've spoken about success and these principles so much, and every bit of wisdom, from the books of Napoleon Hill to the more new age people like Tony Robbins. It all starts with that clear picture and desire of something in the future that you then ultimately tell a story alongside and align to, and then you start moving in that direction, or rendering every opportunity for that to come into reality. And that has been proven true to me time and time again. And even as I sit here, John, thinking, man, maybe John is insane. I've been like, I mean, so much of what he says is smart and has really positively influenced my life. But dude, crystals, like, fuck.
Let me divert to a story about back when I was working with that wizard named Etienne in Mexico.
Please.
So I went to Mexico to hang out with this guy, to this like energy healing course that he was going to have. And so I thought it was going to be like, at like a hotel or a hotel like ballroom or something, like every other conference I'd ever been to. I show up to this guy's like tiny apartment in like the ghetto of this town in Mexico. And when I show up at the time that the event was supposed to start, he was like in his underwear and came to the door and was like, "Oh, welcome, come on in. I'll brew you some coffee." And I'm like, "What the fuck is going on here?" And so like slowly this kind of ragtag group of like weird people that are into this type of stuff show up. And he has us all getting into a group, and he starts to have us do these energy structures where think about if you had like a bunch of Lincoln Logs or like Tinker Toys, or things that we had in the States when we were a kid. They're basically like these things that you can connect together, kind of like Legos. And so what we were doing was basically like in our minds seeing these like structures that we were building around us, and then we were like putting dials on them, and each part of the structure would represent, okay, this is your love life, and this is your intellect, and this is your emotions, and then you would build in a dial where you could dial it up and down from 1 to 10. And so what he was showcasing is that you're inventing it all. Your consciousness is under the direction of you, but you have to create some kind of a construct to be able to engage with it. And so he was showing how you could basically build an energetic structure around anything by visualizing some structure and saying, okay, this part of the structure represents this thing in my life. And now there's a dial on here. Okay, what's the dial at right now? It looks like it's a 2. Okay, I'm going to turn this up to a 10 because I really want to dial up my love life. And so this was basically another permission slip, right? Of like how to consciously manifest things. So then he one of the most interesting things about this guy was that he constantly felt like there was this alien race that lived in another dimension called the Dracos that was trying to attack humanity, and that one of his missions was to like protect people from these Dracos. So across the street, this around like noon, it's this Mexican dive bar starts playing this like very loud music that we're trying to meditate, and it's just like this loud like Deo Gadeo like Tejano music, and he is like, okay, I'm gonna show you how powerful your energy can be, because because the Dracos have opened a portal in the speaker across the street because they don't like the energetic structure that we're building here. And I'm like, oh, I can't fucking wait for what's about to come next. I'm like, this is the craziest thing I've ever been a part of. So he goes, okay, I want you to imagine. So he had us rub our hands together like this. He's like, now imagine there's a ball of energy in your hands. He's like, I want you to see it, and I want you to feel this ball of energy in your hands. And then he said, and when you're ready, I want you to throw that ball of energy at the speaker across the street. And so all of us are like throwing the balls of energy, and he's like, okay, that's okay. Do another one. He's like, okay, let me show you how to do it. He goes into this very theatrical like and I swear to God, the music stopped. I swear
Jon,
to you.
fuck off.
And I was like,
don't want to believe
what
it.
is happening here? And then he didn't even congratulate himself or anything. He just said, okay, let's continue the meditation. I was like, this is banana territory. I was like, was that a coincidence? Was that like the greatest coincidence of all time? Or did he just do something?
Oh, sounds like a gangster, you know? Like the Don doesn't gloat about the people that he's murdered, right? Like he just gets back on the business.
He really opened me up to the idea that you can make it whatever you want it to be. He had some of the most insane stories, and I realized, oh, this is like spiritual improv. And the only rule in improv is yes and. And I was an improv actor, so I was perfect to be a part of this group because I was like, let's see where this goes. Like, if nothing else, this is literally the most interesting group of people I've ever been with.
Well, yeah, and I guess that leads me to probably a good way that we could tie this all into a bow. Jon, you mentioned it is truly our choice to tune into this. And then you go and you tell a story about ending up in an apartment in Mexico with these characters that are exploring how to play around with and use energy. And so what I'm not getting, I guess, is the sale of this, you know, like, can you sell to me, Jon? Oh, no, firstly, before you do that, tell me about these people. What was your impression? What was like, like I have an idea of what it might be to go to, especially maybe 20 years ago, a metaphysical conference and all these things. And I imagine that we've caught up, or more of a majority have caught up to these understandings and this part of the reality. But yeah, what was your, I guess, perception of the characters that you came across throughout these
Yeah.
travels in your 20s? And then sell it to me, Jon. Sell it to me. I want to make the choice, but I don't want to go
Yeah,
to Mexico and end up
you
in an
know what,
apartment
you
with a
know what
bloke.
they all were, in addition to being incredibly weird, which I guess I am too, so I fit right in, but they were free spirits. They did whatever they wanted to do. And so that was the consciousness that allowed them to show up into the middle of nowhere in Mexico and be at this event. And the sense that I got was that they were all happy because they did what they wanted to do. And so, you know, I didn't get the sense that any of them had a lot of money. I didn't either at the time. And but they had a deep curiosity about life, and they had a willingness to suspend judgment on everything. Like another example is we're walking through Mexico at night, and we go into this liquor store, and there's all of this like Mexican wine there, and Etienne goes, "I'm going to tell you how to pick the best wine." He goes, "Pick up a bottle," and so we all pick up the bottle. He goes, "Okay, now imagine you are pouring it into a glass." And so we all imagine we're pouring it into a glass. "Now take a sip." He goes, "Tell me what you taste." And so then, like, because it's an improv game, right? Everybody's like, "Oh,
Yes, and
I taste these berries, and then I taste this." He's like, "Try harder. It's actually more like this smoky fruit." And so he goes through all of these wines, and he's like telling you what each of them tastes like, which maybe he's just making it all up. But what I was keenly aware of, and what I took away from that experience, was you just have to have fun with it. Like, it doesn't, nothing is so anchored, it doesn't matter. Like, think about what a kid does. A kid just makes up reality. Hey, the sidewalk's lava, and home base is the tree, and no girls allowed in the fort. Like, that's what you do when you're a kid. And that's what Etienne, who's a 50-year-old man, was still doing. And he was having so much goddamn fun. And I recognized, oh, I'm being way too serious about life. And I don't know, I actually don't think any of that was actually real. Like, I do think that he was working with energy in an interesting way. But I think the reason that I was drawn to that was to have the recognition that you get to choose your own adventure and you get to make it whatever you want. I could have been like, "This is bullshit. I want my money back." But instead I was like, "Let's see what's here." Like, when am I ever going to be in this situation again? And I remember we would stay at his apartment until like 3 in the morning, and then go back to our Airbnbs. And I remember walking through this very dangerous ghetto part of Mexico in the middle of the night. There's like government military vehicles like going around, because this neighborhood is so crime ridden. And I remember just being a white American with no weapons, walking in the middle of the night by myself, and feeling so secure and so confident in my own position in reality, and just having a recognition that this is my adventure. I get to decide what it is, and this is so much fun. And that was impactful for me, because I went back to America, and that's how I lived my life. Like, I did what I wanted to do. I followed my interest. I played the improv game of yes and it has opened up incredible opportunities for me. So the sale for why you want to feel into energy like this is that if you're so locked into your linear thinking mind, you have you have blinders on, and you're not seeing all of the possibilities that are available to you, because you're looking at the world through a keyhole. And one of the most interesting things that learning to feel energy did for me is it opened me up to new experiences, and it gave me just enough of a nudge to do things that I otherwise wouldn't do. Things like jumping off cliffs and into the ocean. Like when I was asking myself, am I going to survive this? Yes. Okay, let's do it. Like it was an excuse. It was a permission slip for me to believe things were possible for myself before I could believe things were possible for myself. And through that experience, I proved to myself that I'm the creator of my own reality. I'm the creator of my own adventure. I can have and do whatever I want to do. And if I am truly passionate about it in each moment, it will not only benefit me, but it will benefit my peer group, my family, my community, and the world around me, because I will become a clear channel for creative energy consciousness to flow through me. And that to me is the reason to explore these things, because you will knock yourself out of linear thinking, and you will live a bigger life, and you will live with more wonder, and you'll have more adventure. And analytical people, you know, I meet them all the time in my work as a technologist, and because they're so analytical, because they believe that everything is anchored in physicality, there's a boringness to them and to their lives. And this is where depression sets in. And I would rather be inventing a fabulous life that isn't real than to be bored by one that is. And the interesting thing is that you recognize that the more that you just invent your life, the more that you become the person that you want to become, the more that you say, I'm going to be able to pick out the best wine with my mind, the more that you actually start to have experiences like that, because reality takes a cue from you. It's a feedback loop. And so I guess that's my best sale of these things, is that when you get out of linearity, you start to become more multidimensional in nature, because this energy is a dimensional energy. And there is truly magic in that. And you will recognize, in the order that you need to recognize it, the things that you need to recognize to become a wizard and to wield magic in your life.
Beautiful. John, incredible. Yeah, I don't want to tarnish that last little speech. That was beautiful, man.
If nothing else, you'll probably end up at a weird French Mexican guy's house in
And,
Mexico, and you'll have a great
and
story to tell on a podcast.
exactly, what a bloody story, what a bloody experience. Much prefer to do that than to be locked up in the same four walls that I see every single day, because the world's the way I see it now, and that'll never change. But
That's right.
John, mate, really appreciate it, brother. That was great.
Yeah. And I guess to anybody who's still watching, let us know what feeling energy opened up for you, because I think it's different for everyone. But I've heard many people have, you know, crazy, wild metaphysical experiences as they unlock some of this energetic sensitivity. And if nothing else, it allows you to notice what's happening in your body more. And the more that you notice what's happening in your body, the more that you can clear blockages and really tap into your intuitive self. So we'll see
And the
y'all on the
less you'll
next one.
sacrifice what you want and who you are.
Exactly. And you'll recognize that who you are is a bigger who you are than you thought.
Beautiful.
Later,
Man.
y'all.